We cannot allow this king to destroy everything we have worked for. One man said, "We must take action," and so a plan was formed. The villagers, armed with tools and torches, marched to the palace gates, demanding to speak with the king. When King Mezie heard the noise outside, he was shocked. He had never imagined that the people would rise up against him. Long ago, in the vast kingdom of Umuga, there lived a wise and respected king named Oba. His reign had brought years of peace and prosperity to the land. King Oba was known far and wide for his wisdom, kindness, and fairness. He made decisions that benefited all, from the poorest farmer to the wealthiest merchant. Under his rule, Umuga blossomed like the rich gardens in the royal palace, where flowers of every color bloomed in the warm sunlight. Villagers often came to the palace with petitions, confident that their king would listen to their cries and deliver justice. There was no hunger, and the marketplace was always bustling with trade. However, despite all his successes as a ruler, King Oba carried a heavy burden in his heart. His only son, Prince Mezie. Mezie, though born into royalty, was nothing like his father. Where King Oba spent his time with the elders, listening to their wisdom and sharing in the concerns of his people, Prince Mezie surrounded himself with flatterers and companions who were only interested in their own pleasure. Mezie was a handsome young man, tall and proud, with the looks of a future king, but inside his heart was shallow. He had been spoiled from birth, always given what he wanted, and he grew to expect that life would always be easy. The kingdom's wealth had been built through the hard work of the people, yet Mezie had never lifted a finger to contribute. One evening, King Oba sat in his royal chambers, staring out into the setting sun, deep in thought. His advisor, Chief Ikenna, stood nearby, sensing the king's troubled spirit. "Your Majesty," Ikenna said gently, "you have ruled wisely for many years, and the people love you. What troubles you so?" The king sighed heavily, rubbing his temples as if to ease the weight of his thoughts. "It is my son, Prince Mezie," he said. "He is not ready. When I look at him, I see a boy who cares only for his own pleasures. He does not think of the people, nor of the responsibility that comes with the throne. I fear for the future of Umuga after I am gone." Ikenna, ever loyal, tried to reassure the king. "The prince is young," he said. "He still has time to learn. Perhaps if you guide him more closely, he will see the wisdom of your ways." But King Oba shook his head. "I have tried, Ikenna. I have spoken to him many times, yet he does not listen. His heart is filled with pride. He believes that being king is about wearing fine clothes and sitting on the throne, but he does not understand the true weight of the crown." Meanwhile, outside the palace walls, Prince Mezie was hosting another of his extravagant parties. The palace gardens were filled with the sound of drumming and laughter, the scent of roasted meat and fresh fruits filling the air. Young men and women, dressed in their finest clothes, danced and drank palm wine under the stars. Prince Mezie sat at the center of it all, his golden robe shimmering in the torchlight, a smug smile on his face as he watched his friends enjoy themselves. "When I am king," he boasted to his closest friend, Iked, "we will have even grander feast than this. I will make sure the palace is always full of food and drinks. The people work and we enjoy. That is how it should be." Ikedi, eager to remain in the prince's favor, nodded eagerly. "Yes, Prince Mezie, you will be the greatest king Umuga has ever seen. Who cares about the farmers and the traders? They are here to serve us." The prince laughed, raising his cup. "To the future of our kingdom, long live the king." His friends echoed his toast, but none of them saw the concerned looks of the palace guards and the servants who overheard their conversation. The prince's arrogance was spreading like wildfire through the kingdom, and the people were growing uneasy. Rumors of the prince's careless behavior began to spread the villages. Farmers who once admired the royal family now spoke in whispers of disappointment. "What will happen to us when the king is gone?" one farmer asked his neighbor. "Prince Mezie does not care for us. He only thinks of himself." Another villager, an elderly woman who had lived through many reigns, shook her head sadly. "The kingdom was built on hard work and unity. If the prince does not change, he will destroy everything that his father has built." As the weeks passed, King Oba grew more and more worried about his son's future. One evening, he called Prince Mezie to his chambers. The room was dimly lit, the air heavy with the smell of incense. The king sat on his wooden stool, his face lined with worry. Mezie entered, his silk robe trailing behind him, a look of indifference on his face. "Father, you called for me?" he asked, though it was clear from his tone that he did not wish to be there. King Oba looked at his son for a long moment before speaking. "Mezie, my son, you will soon be king. The people will look to you for guidance, for protection. A king's duty is to serve, not to be served. I fear that you do not understand this." The prince sighed, clearly bored with the conversation. "Father, I know how to be king. You have ruled for many years and you have done well. But when I am king, I will do things my way." King Oba's eyes filled with sadness. "And what way is that, Mezie? Spending the kingdom's wealth on parties while the people go hungry? Raising taxes so that you can build grander palaces?" Mezie waved his hand dismissively. "The people will manage, father. They always do. You worry too much." The king stood, his voice rising with urgency. "I worry because I care, Mezie. If you do not change, you will lose everything. The people are the strength of the kingdom. Without them, there is no kingdom to rule." But Mezie had already stopped listening. He bowed slightly and turned to leave. "Good night, father. I will rule in my own way." Not long after this conversation, King Oba fell ill. The once strong king, who had led his people with wisdom and strength, was now confined to his bed. The news spread quickly through the kingdom, and the people gathered at the palace gates, praying for their king's recovery. But the illness was too great, and after several days, King Oba took his final breath. The kingdom fell into mourning. Men and women wept openly in the streets, and a grand funeral was held to honor the great king who had served them so well. Prince Mezie, now King Mezie, stood at his father's funeral, but he did not share in the people's sorrow. He saw his father's death as an opportunity to finally do things his way. At last, he thought to himself, I am free to rule as I please. He stood tall, dressed in the finest robes, his crown gleaming in the sunlight, but there was no grief in his heart. As the villagers chanted prayers for their late king, Mezie's mind was already filled with plans for his own reign. As soon as he was crowned king, Mezie wasted no time in implementing his vision for the kingdom. He raised taxes, demanding more from the farmers and merchants to fund his endless parties and luxuries. The palace was filled with new treasures, golden statues, silk curtains, and the finest foods imported from distant lands. But while King Mezie and his friends indulged in their wealth, the people of Umuga suffered. Farms went untended as farmers struggled to pay the heavy taxes. The market, once bustling with trades, became quieter as merchants could no longer afford to keep their stores open. The villagers, once proud of their kingdom, now lived in fear and resentment. In the village of Ope, an elderly woman named Neka sat outside her home, watching the once lively streets now filled with weary faces. This is not the Umuga I knew, she said to her neighbor. King Oba cared for us, but his son will ruin us all. Her neighbor, a young farmer named Chidi, nodded in agreement. The king demands more from us than we can give, he said, his voice filled with frustration. We cannot survive this. As the months passed, the discontent among the villagers grew. Villagers began to gather in secret, whispering of rebellion. We cannot allow this king to destroy everything we have worked for. One man said, we must take action, and so a plan was formed. The villagers, armed with tools and torches, marched to the palace gates, demanding to speak with the king. When King Mezie heard the noise outside, he was shocked. He had never imagined that the people would rise up against him. What do they want? He asked, pacing nervously in his chambers. Why are they angry with me? His advisor, a young man who had taken advantage of Mezie's reign to enrich himself, shrugged. They are just villagers, my lord. They do not understand the ways of the kings. Ignore them and they will go away. But the noise grew louder, and soon the palace was surrounded by angry villagers. Mezie had no choice but to face the crowd. He stepped out onto the palace steps, his royal robe flowing behind him, but he was no longer greeted with cheers of admiration. Instead, the people shouted angrily, their faces full of frustration and pain. You are no king, a voice cried from the crowd. You have stolen from us. We starve while you feast. Another voice added, your father was a great king. He cared for us. But you have betrayed us. Mezie stood frozen, the crown on his head suddenly feeling heavier than ever before. For the first time, he felt the weight of his actions, and it terrified him. He had always believed that ruling meant power and luxury, but now he saw the faces of the very people whose backs his wealth had been built upon. Their suffering was undeniable, and it was all because of him. Please listen to me, he called out, his voice trembling. I will change, I promise. I will make things right. But the people were beyond words now. They had endured too much, and their anger could no longer be soothed by empty promises. It is too late for your words, Mezie, a farmer shouted, raising his tool in the air. You were meant to serve us, but instead you made us slaves to your greed. Another villager stepped forward, pointing at Mezie. Step down, you are not fit to rule. Mezie's heart raced, his hands trembled as he looked at the sea of faces before him. These were the same people who had once cheered for him during festivals, who had celebrated his birth as the future king. Now they wanted him gone. He turned to his advisor, but the man had slipped away, abandoning the king in his moment of need. For the first time in his life, Mezie was alone. Desperate, Mezie fell to his knees before the crowd. Please, he begged, I was wrong. I see that now. I will change. I will lower the taxes. I will care for the kingdom as my father did. Just give me another chance. But the people had already made up their minds. They had suffered too long under Mezie's selfish rule, and they were ready for a new leader, one who would rule with wisdom and compassion as King Oba had done. Without another word, the villagers stormed the palace, removing Mezie from the throne. The once proud prince, who had believed he was destined for greatness, was stripped of his royal garment and sent away from the palace, forced to live as a common man. As he walked through the streets, the people turned their backs on him, refusing to offer even a glance of pity. He was no longer their king, but a man who had lost everything because of his own arrogance. In the days that followed, the elders of Umuga gathered to choose a new ruler. They selected a young woman named Chinaza, a respected and wise village leader who had always put the needs of the people first. Under her rule, the kingdom began to heal. The taxes were lowered, the farmers returned to their farms, and the marketplace was once again filled with life. The people rejoiced, grateful to have a leader who understood the true meaning of service. As for Mezie, he wandered the streets of Umuga, his once golden crown now a distant memory. He was forced to live humbly, walking alongside the very people he had once ignored. Tilled the soil or fetched water, he thought of his father's words. A king's duty is to serve, not to be served. Those words echoed in his mind, haunting him as he realized how deeply he had failed. Years passed, and Mezie grew older, his youthful arrogance long gone. He had learned the hard way that being a ruler was not about wealth or power, but about caring for the people who relied on you. He no longer dreamed of grand feasts or golden palaces. Instead, he found peace in the simple life, working the land and helping his fellow villagers just as they had once helped him, even when he had not deserved it. Though he was no longer a king, Mezie had finally understood what it meant to lead. It was a lesson he wished he had learned long ago, but now it was too late for him to change the course of his own destiny. However, he hoped that his story would serve as a warning to others, a reminder that true leadership comes from humility, compassion, and the willingness to serve those who place their trust in you. And so, the kingdom of Umuga flourished once again under the wise and just rule of Queen Chinaza, The people lived in peace, knowing that their new ruler would never forget the lessons of the past. As for Mezie, though he had lost the throne, he had gained something far more valuable, an understanding of what it truly means to be a king. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this beautiful story by Petrolina. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share and comment. It helps us grow our channel. See you in my next story.